WGPR Detroit HD2.
You're watching WHPS, Highland Park, Detroit.
FM 88.1 WHPR, Highland Park.
WVIE 107.3 FM Charlotte, Amalia, Virgin Islands.
The views and opinions expressed on the following show are not necessarily the views and opinions of WHPS, its affiliates, management, or sponsors.
It's that time, y'all. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. Yeah, it's straight talk with Valerie. Come on. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. Yeah, it's straight talk with Valerie. Come on. It's straight talk with Valerie. It's straight talk with Valerie. Come on. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. It's straight talk with Valerie. Come on. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. It's straight talk with Valerie. Come on. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. It's straight talk with Valerie. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. It's straight talk with Valerie. Come on. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. It's straight talk with Valerie. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. It's straight talk with Valerie. Come on.
What's going on? What's going on, Detroit and surrounding communities? You are listening to the Real Black Coffee, no sugar, no cream, straight talk with Valerie. And we're going to come at you unfiltered and straight tonight. It is a shame that after a couple of years, 3 years, I've been talking about this same subject over and over. And that subject is wrongful convictions. They have started these units called conviction integrity units, and not enough people have been released. Those that do get released, not enough of them receive the compensation that they deserve. When I think about the term integrity unit anyway, I think about the fact that the integrity that should be policed, ensured that it's intact, and anything else that goes along with that should be in the judge's and prosecutor's office. So aren't we doing something backwards a little bit when you're letting people out who never should have been in? Granted, I do believe that they should be released, but I'm just saying, I haven't heard a component of the conviction integrity unit, including that piece of checking the judges and the prosecutors and everyone else that has something to do with the reasons why we have wrongful convictions in the first place. So my guest tonight is someone who's been fighting really hard for a very long time for his son. I want to introduce to you Mr. Donald Dewey. Say hello to everyone, Mr. Dewey.
Hello, everyone.
Mr.
Glad
Dewey,
to be on the show.
you've been fighting for a very long time for your son. Let's start out by talking about what type of child was your son growing up?
Jeremiah was a very, very quiet person. He never gotten into any trouble. If you were to look up his criminal record, there is none. Mm-hmm. Well, let me restate that. He did have a incident where his dog got loose here in Presque County, and they had to make a big deal out of the fact that he had a dog running loose. like that was a major crime up here in Presque Isle County. But that's just the way this community is. But other than that, no criminal things at all. Absolutely nothing of any kind. He went through school. He graduated from high school. He went in the United States Air Force for a period of time. And when he got out of there, he just started working as an electrical apprentice and had been working to complete the job when all this stuff happened, and he got kicked out of the union and never finished.
I just wanted to set the stage for this awful nightmare because your son had a very promising career.
Yes, he did.
Decent human being, law-abiding citizen, who has now been locked up. So take us to the day of the incident and tell me what happened that started this whirlwind of a nightmare for your family. Take us to the day that this happened.
Well, first of all, this is an extremely complicated case. This involves both my sons, Jeremiah and Nathan. Nathan, back in 2002, December 24th, 2002, was incarcerated in the Presque Isle County Jail, and he was locked up for allegedly having sex with a young girl. Nathan was just turned 18, and the girl supposedly at 14, and she did not accuse Nathan. Another girl did. She said she heard Nathan and this 14-year-old girl having sex in a bedroom, and she heard them through a closed bedroom door, whatever that means. Well, they took that as gospel, and they arrested Nathan. Nathan was sitting in the jail pending a trial or further investigation or whatever. On December 24th, 2002, he was found hanging from the bars of the jail, and they cut him down. They sent him to the hospital. He was in a coma for about 2 or 3 months. He came out of it, but he had a debilitating brain injury that he could not speak, he could not walk, he could not eat, he could not go to the bathroom. He couldn't do anything without the assistance of someone else. We filed a U.S. federal lawsuit with a local attorney who became friends with us. Once that lawsuit was filed, Attorney Ducastle, shortly after that, was found dead in his apartment, supposedly of a suicide or drug overdose. We don't believe that one tiny bit. We believe he was killed. So any way, that U.S. federal lawsuit was settled through the federal judge, and we were awarded the money. That happened on April 20th of 2005, 3 years later. Several days later, on April 27th, 2005, an anonymous person from this community called the police and said Jeremiah's stepdaughter may be sexually being abused by someone. The Michigan State Police conducted an investigation along with CPS. They did this for 3 months. They interviewed the young girl. She said multiple times, at least 3, possibly 4 or more, that no one was inappropriately touching her. Then they found out she had a rash on her, which was from not properly wiping herself. Somebody thought, oh, this might be herpes. So they went through all the routine to check to see if it was herpes. A doctor in Sheboygan, Michigan, Dr. Leger, took a culture of the rash and She grew it. I don't know how they do that, put it in a petri dish or something and grew it. Dr. Dev of the U of M, University of Michigan Child Protection Unit, the expert for the state of Michigan, said that this rash that Brittany had was not herpes. She came back with a positive test for herpes, but not from the rash in 2005. It was before that. Well, medical records from her birth that we have a copy of state she was never tested for any STDs at birth. Now, that sample that they took of the rash, it was checked for herpes, and per Dr. Leger, it was not herpes. So the case was closed by the Michigan State Police, and in the status of it, on the document, it says unfounded. So because the girl said, or child said, no one was inappropriately touching her, and because the rash was not the STD herpes, it was closed. End of story. 8 years later, this child was in the local high school. She was taking naked photographs of herself and putting them on the internet, a site called KIK. She got caught by her boyfriend. He was extremely angry and upset, and somebody, I don't know who, was sharing them all over the school. She got angry. She decided she was moving back to Washington State, where she originally came from. My son said no, and the child's mother said no. The very next day, she decided she's going to play the sexual molestation game and charge my son with inserting his finger into her vagina. No evidence, no witnesses, no nothing. Then the local sheriff's department gets involved in it, and they bring back the charges from 2005. How did they do that? Simple. The sheriff investigator from our community, his son is a Michigan State police trooper out of Kalkaska, Michigan. His son reopened the case. I don't know how you can do that, but they did. So they charged Jeremiah with 4 crimes from that investigation, that closed investigation, but they did not use the information contained in the police report. There are 4 reports from 2005 contained in 10 pages. They only used the first 3 pages to identify there was an investigation, and that was it. Jeremiah's attorneys did nothing. They said nothing. They didn't care. Then they charged him with 1 charge from the 2013 incident. Jeremiah got convicted on that based on the testimony of this child alone. In other words, they determined she had credibility. Now, that's an important factor in this case because there is no other evidence, just the credibility of this child. And any evidence, including any of her Facebook postings she made that show she's not a credible person, were hidden from the trials. And it is clear, if you looked at her Facebook postings, you could clearly see she's a liar or she's an exaggerator of the truth. Simple as that. Jeremiah got convicted on all 5 charges with no evidence of any wrongdoing. He was sentenced to this, now you're going to love this, 22 to 40 years.
What?
22.
That's like taking a life.
I've seen people who have been convicted of murder get less time. 22 to 40 years with no evidence, just based on credibility.
So it sounds like no evidence, right? False confessions, some
Correct.
misconduct, because you said, how did they even get to open that case up? after it had been closed. I am just baffled by the entire situation, but 22 to 40 years?
Yes. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm not stupid either. I saw what was going on, and by the time I figured out Jeremiah's retained attorneys, we paid a lot of money for, they were working against my son. And by the time I figured that out, Jeremiah was on his way to prison, 22 to 40 years. Now, just so you understand something, again, I'm not a lawyer. He had an appeal attorney by right. He actually had 2 trials. He only had 1 appeal by right. That attorney only appealed the 22 to 40 years that Jeremiah received in his sentence. And the thing of it is, he was innocent, and it could have easily been proven by introducing the evidence they left out of this trials.
Mm-hmm.
So once the Court of Appeals shot down his appeal, I said, no, this ain't happening. I wrote an appeal to the Michigan State Supreme Court, who looked at my appeal, looked at my evidence, sent this case back to the Court of Appeals. But this is where it gets tricky. You have an appeal by right. Then you can have another appeal by court order. It's not an appeal by right, it's an appeal by court order. The question I didn't understand is, who gives that attorney their marching orders, and what do they tell that attorney to appeal or not to appeal? In Jeremiah's case, that second attorney went out of Detroit. She decided to only appeal Jeremiah's extremely high sentence that he received, 22 to 40 years. And I said, what about all these red flag issues, is what I call them. They're warning signs. They're danger signs. They say something is wrong with this case. You need to look at this. They said that the rash she had was herpes. Based off of what? If a doctor in 2005 said it was not herpes, that's Dr. Leger of Sheboygan, and Dr. Dev of the U of M of Michigan both said the rash was not herpes, what evidence did they produce to say it was herpes?
Does your son have that? I mean, that could have been something they could have checked to see if your son had herpes.
They never tested him in 2005 because the case was closed as unfounded. Now, his girlfriend, the mother of the daughter, she did have herpes, both 1 and 2. So, of course, my son having a long-term relationship with her, chances are he had herpes too.
Mm-hmm.
So finally, in 2014, they tested him, and he showed up positive for 1 and 2. Here's the thing. They excluded all medical information from the trials. How was that a benefit to my son?
Exactly. And it seems like the defense attorney should have been all over that. Like, no, wait a minute. You introduced the medical evidence saying that she had herpes, and you're linking that to the case. But now you're saying in my son's defense, we cannot introduce medical information.
Correct. It's the crazy system. I cannot.
This seems like a
Netflix,
like some type of fiction movie or something.
I don't think people realize that something like this can actually happen. We have constitutional rights. We have a right to a fair trial free from bias and prejudice. This case, in my son's case, was not free from prejudice and bias.
That's right, Mr. Dewey.
The judge and the attorney and the prosecutors all worked together to convict my son. And nobody has to believe me for anything. All you got to do is look at the transcripts. Clearly in the transcript, the judge is telling my son's court-appointed attorney during the preliminary exams and stuff to work with the prosecutor to come up with the right language in the petition We all know what the crime is. We all know what the charges are. So you guys work together. He was orchestrating this thing completely. And if that's not prejudice and bias, then what is?
It happens all the time, unfortunately.
Now,
And,
see, I would
judges
never
have
believe it.
canons that they should be following as well. But see, the Judicial Tenure Committee, they're not even holding judges accountable
No.
at all. So we have all of these things in place, and no one is holding anyone accountable. They all are in cahoots with one another. And
Yes.
then you have a few attorneys. I did 6 shows on the probate court system in Oakland County. And there are attorneys who know what's going on, but they don't want to say a word. And they will not say a word on camera or on any recording. But they have admitted that they know that there is wrongful incarcerations happening, assets being pillaged, and you can go down the list.
Yes.
And that's why the Judicial Tenure Committee should do something about it. We have too many cases such as your son's. Too many. And it seems nobody cares. I'm just wondering, if prisons weren't privatized anymore and people weren't making all of this money off of them, I wonder if we would still be having these same types of conversation.
I doubt it.
I doubt it also. It's a lot of pay to play. I'll fill your jail up if you fill my pockets.
Correct.
And it's happening. And
I've never seen so much corruption in my entire life until this.
It's a lot. A whole lot. So you have, for clarity for my listeners, you have 2 sons
Yes.
that are incarcerated.
No. Nathan was found hung, and because of his disability, they released him back to us and dropped all charges on him. Nathan was in the Alpena Hospital for 3 months in a coma. And from there, he went to the Mary Free Bed Hospital down in Grand Rapids. Mm-hmm. And he was down there, I'm going to say, for about 6 to 9 months. From there, he went to a brain facility in Carroll, Michigan, called the Lighthouse. And he was there, I'm going to say, almost a year. And Nathan's brain is there. His body is not capable of doing anything. And during Thanksgiving in 2003, we took Nathan home for Thanksgiving. And it might have been 2003, 2004. We brought him home for Thanksgiving. We had a great time for a week or two. And then we brought him back to Mary Free Bed, and Nathan got very, very quiet and sad. You could see that in his eyes, and he wasn't moving around. Remember, I said he can't talk, but you can look at him and you can tell, he's thinking and stuff. He knew where he was at. And to be quite honest with you, I could not bring him into the facility because I was tearing up already. I couldn't even look into his eyes because I knew for a fact if he started crying right there, I would have ended it. I could not have dealt with that. So I had my wife bring him in, and as soon as she got in the car, she was quiet and I got quiet. And we drove from Carroll all the way back home to Rogers City, both of us crying all the way back home. We just, we can't live like that. We love our children, all our children. I don't care how old they are. I'm the type of father, they are always my kids. I don't care how much of an adult they are. They are always going to be my kids. And I'm going to protect them. And I'm going to protect them from anybody. I don't care if it's the governor of Michigan or the attorney general in this case. I'm going to protect my kids from these people who are abusing their power. And that power is given to them by us, the people. And the problem is they don't respect us enough because they think that we're just stupid. We're going to sit back and let them do what they want to do. That's exactly what happened in my son's case. So anyway, we decided at Christmas time, we were bringing Nathan home and he wasn't coming back. And as we were gathering up all his stuff, the administrator for that facility came and said, you don't really need all that stuff for, a 1 week or 2 week Christmas vacation. I said, Nathan's not coming back. He's staying with us forever. And so she went and got the owner of the facility, and they both got me off to the side. And she goes, you do understand that you're going to be responsible completely for your son. And I said, I've been responsible for my son from the day of his birth. This doesn't scare me in the lightest. She goes, you just don't understand the complications of this medical issue. I said, I had him before you got him. I understand this completely. That kid was constantly in and out of medical facilities while he was there with thrush or some other kind of illness. Since he's been with us, the only thing he ever got injured in is when he fell out of bed. No thrush, no nothing else. So we've taken all the precautions necessary so he doesn't fall out of bed. And he's an extremely happy person. And his life expectancy was only supposed to be 5 years. That was in 2002. He's been alive over 20 years. And he's very healthy and he's very happy. Now, one other issue I wanted to mention is Jeremiah's case is currently sitting in the Conviction Integrity Unit of the Michigan Attorney Generals. They sent it to the Cooley Law Innocence Project to check for DNA. Now, what DNA? I don't know. Maybe it's the DNA, the culture that Dr. Leger took and determined that it was not herpes back then. I don't know. Nobody's ever told me about that. But there's no other DNA involved in this case. So they kicked it back to the AG's office and said, there's nothing we can do. The DNA's too old or something like that. So now it's sitting in the Attorney General's office for them to evaluate some other thing to see if Jeremiah can get out of prison. So I contacted the director of the Integrity Unit.
Val Newman?
Yep. And I sent her a text message with all the red flags that have been going on in this case since day one, starting with the 10-page Michigan State Police report that clearly says the rash from 2005 was not the STD herpes. Medical records from Dr. Leger, Dr. Dev, and a physician assistant from Thunder Bay up here in Rogers City, Rick DeMar, that she said no one was inappropriately touching her back there in 2005. So based off of all that information, nobody wanted to look at it. They ignored it. So then we appealed. Remember what I said? We appealed it, and it went before the Michigan State Court of Appeals. And in it, they appointed an AG, an assistant AG, who his name is Ping, AAG Ping. And he said during the oral exam, because I was sitting right there, I wanted to talk on Jeremiah's behalf. Daniel Ping said during the oral exam to the 3-panel judges that Jeremiah sexually molested Brittany hundreds of times in 2005 and gave her the STD. Hundreds.
Where did they get hundreds from? We went from fingering to hundreds of times.
In 2005. Hundreds of times. And he gave her the STD herpes. I'm looking at the judges and saying, evidence, evidence. What evidence does he have to produce this? And one of the judges looked at me and said, knock that off now. So I just folded my hands. I'm looking at my son's attorney like, hello, are you going to say anything? She didn't even do an investigation in this case. Had she properly investigated this case and looked at the Michigan State Police report, read the Michigan State Police troopers' sworn testimony, read the testimony of the CPS investigator, Pam Idame, read the testimony of the physician assistant, Rick DeMar, she would have come up with all kinds of questions as to what happened in this case. How did this get this far? It's very easy. When a judge goes out of his way to work with a prosecutor and your own attorneys, this is what you're going to get in a so-called fair court of law. There's no way anyone could read these transcripts and say that was a fair trial. No one. I dare them to.
They won't be able to because it was not fair. So let me go for another point of clarity. So your son had a public defender, or did you also retain counsel?
We had both. Jeremiah at first had a court-appointed public defender for about a year. That attorney saw what was going on. That attorney, the minute he did what the judge said, and the judge wanted him to get a pleading out there, a no contest pleading for, I believe it was either $10,000 or $20,000. Remember, court-appointed attorney. He wanted $10,000 or $20,000 from our family to get Jeremiah a plea deal in which Jeremiah would plead guilty to one count of criminal sexual conduct in the first degree. All the children would go back to their mother, Jeremiah's girlfriend. Jeremiah would spend 1 year in the county jail. And Jeremiah said to the court-appointed attorney, but I'm innocent. And he says to Jeremiah in front of me, you're going to be found guilty and you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. And I said, how could that possibly happen with all of this evidence that clearly shows Jeremiah is innocent? Well, how did I know that the prosecuting attorney and the judge can deny evidence during a criminal trial? How did I know that retained or even appointed attorneys can go into court and work with the judge to get excluded evidence that proves you're innocent? There's all kinds of constitutional rights, Michigan state rights, and rules that cover that subject. But if nobody brings it up, guess what? You get convicted. It doesn't matter if you're innocent or guilty. Who cares? We're in a court of law. The judge is unbiased. He's unprejudiced. Except if you read the transcripts, you can clearly see his prejudice and bias in the transcripts, in the man's own words. I don't get it. That's what court of appeals are for. That's what our Supreme Court is for. These are all elected officials who are supposed to be working for us, the people of Michigan. Now, granted, I've only been in Michigan 20-some years, but that's 20-some years. I'm a resident. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a voter. And these people constantly work together. Matter of fact, the judge involved in this used to be an officer in the Prosecuting Attorneys Association. So the chances are he's friends with many, many, many of these elected judges in the Court of Appeals and the Michigan State Supreme Court.
You're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. And that's when the Judicial Tenure Committee should become involved. And, you know, that's another thing that I don't see or hear enough of. That's our house, Mr. Judge. You work for us. The taxpayers' money pays your salary and everybody else that is on your team. How dare you disrespect me in my own house? But people don't look at it that way because of the fear and the intimidation and everything that goes along with it. You don't even want to say anything. They'll hold you in contempt of court. Don't you dare sound like you have some sense and the ability to interpret the law to the degree that you can uncover some of this nonsense and these heinous acts that they're doing. They definitely will shut you down.
Absolutely.
I've listened to other stories where people who were educated enough and very aware of the BS that goes on in the system, they were escorted out or kicked out of the courtroom. You can't come back here anymore. Banned. Not even allowed to come in anymore. So that they can railroad people and do what they want to do. How they want, why they want, and when they want. And it's not a damn thing we can do about it. I find it interesting. You brought up the point that, you know, the officer may have had some type of relationship or employment relationship going on. I just don't feel like public defenders and judges, etc., should all be a part of the same office. So I'm going to yuck it up with you. We just had lunch, you know, maybe even a beer, but now I'm going to go in this courtroom and pretend like you and I are at odds with one another. Keyword, pretend.
Right.
Like you and I are at odds with one another. There is no balance of the scales in that situation. The scales are tilted against you going in.
Correct.
So again, when I talk about integrity and an integrity unit, these are some of the things that need to be looked at. The integrity of the judges, the integrity of public defenders, the integrity of the prosecutor's office, public defender working for the same office as the judge, etc. How can they properly defend someone? And you know, a lot of people want to give the public defender a bad mark or low credibility, like, oh, you have a public defender? That's too bad you get a paid defender. Some of these public defenders are good. They just have to work under the auspice of these judges and everyone else because they're in the same district.
Correct.
And because they're just getting in the game, they're not going to go against all of these other people. They'll be blackballed before they even leave that courtroom. They will be sanctioned. I've had some attorneys say, you know, I can't speak up on this or I can't speak up on that because I'll be sanctioned for doing your job, for telling the truth. But that's their way of silencing them.
Yes.
And making them play the game. It's the good old boys club. And you're going to play along. You know, our criminal justice system is ran just like the mafia.
Yes. I agree.
Yeah. It's ran just like the mafia, like the Godfather or something. If you really, really pay attention to it, and you can come up missing, you will be found dead, and all of these other things if you don't play along. And people know it, and they're afraid of it.
That's interesting, that remark you just said. Back in 2002, when Nathan was found hung from the bars of the drunk tank, his attorney who represented him and filed that lawsuit, Donald Ducastle, a Michigan attorney, was found dead in his apartment. I told you that. Like I said, they said it was a suicide or a drug overdose. I don't believe that in any way. Now, in Jeremiah's case, this gets real interesting. Jeremiah was working with the National Center for Due Process out of Livonia, Michigan. That was operated by a guy, or the president of the organization was Jason Paul Weber. He was a law student at Cornell University. Now, pretty smart guy. He was also a web designer and had his own business. Jason seen some things in this case that did not make any sense. Now, Jason wrote up a blog for Jeremiah and put it on the National Center for Due Process. In that blog, he was identifying some critical problems with what the prosecutor and the judges were doing in this case. Would you believe that if I told you shortly after this, Jason Weber died? Mysteriously died. He had made actual contact with the prosecuting attorney of our community. Did they meet? I don't know. All I know was he was dead. Nobody contacted his parents. I did. And then I told them what had happened. They were shocked, just totally shocked. I said, I cannot believe law enforcement of our community did not contact and tell you this. But maybe they were going to do it at a later date. I don't know. I don't know if they ever did. But I just find it interesting that Ducastle from Onaway, Michigan, he was killed or dead or something happened to him. And then Jason Weber, something happened to him. It doesn't, make sense to me that these were coincidences. I just don't believe that. I believe something truly happened by someone very, very powerful. He was one of Michigan's own, Ducastle. He was an attorney. Why is it nobody cared enough to properly investigate that case? Something's wrong.
Well, you have been listening to the Real Black Coffee, No Sugar, No Cream, Straight Talk. And we've been talking about the wrongful conviction of Jeremiah Dewey with his father, Mr. Dewey. We're going to take a musical break. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more to Mr. Dewey about the case. And then, what does justice look like for Mr. Dewey? We'll be right back.
From the moment I met you, something whispered in my ear that you were the one. And I had won by merely becoming a contender for a prize that the world would surely envy. You were more than just beautiful and friendly. Cause see, I instantly wanted you to see the end with me. We were made for an eternity. You reminded me of my mortality, cause at that very second I thought that I would die if you weren't the one God had chosen to love me.
A gift for telling my heart desires. A love remains so fierce with fire. My real revenge supply my needs. Yet I was lost, but you found me. Perfect is the heart for peace. All my love I guarantee. You and I make unity.
hold up. I don't give my heart away with ease, but when you walk by, I feel a breeze that makes me want to take a chance and open my mind to our romance. Now I know you're not out here playing games. I thought you were tripping when you wrote Imani than your last name. And I admit that, babe, I feel the same. Come through, boo, let's do this thing, yeah.
Downfalls make it worth it, put our pride aside. Against the odds, we survive, leave a past behind. Saw you walking with some friends, took a bold approach. Introduction and kiss your hand, I be doing the most. Confident, still not aggressive. First sight of your smile, in the presence of a blessing. No love in the wild, so exchange of our numbers. FaceTiming for hours, a few laughs, and now I wonder. One look in your eyes, might divide or bring us closer to trust, closer to love. Entangled, thinking marry my crush. No pressure until you press it. Now I'm seeing you blush. No rush, no extra flexing. I'm just feeling you such. All these fights from my exes brought our pleasure from pain. Haven't loved in a while, so I'm ready for change. The heart made whole in this world so cold. Black love, everlasting, be our story that's told.
This story one day will be told about the love that took my soul and taken full control. I believe my life is gonna change. I'm not feeling the same. I feel something's on the way. I'm ready for change. I'm ready for change. I'm ready for love to fill my heart, yeah.
I'm ready for change.
I'm ready for change. I'm ready for love to fill my heart, yeah. I'm ready for change. I'm ready for change. I'm ready for love to fill my heart, yeah. I'm ready for change. I'm ready for change. I'm ready for love to fill my heart, yeah. I'm ready for change.
You were listening to Ready for Change by Millard Thomas Jr., and you better believe that song was so appropriate because we are ready for change. During that musical break, I was talking a little bit to Mr. Dewey, and he said something that just blew me away. Mr. Dewey, talk about the probate situation with your one son. I get
My
him
son,
confused. So you
Nathan.
had Jeremiah and
Nathan.
Nathan. So Nathan is the one that's mentally impaired.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, physically impaired. His mental faculties are there. You could see that. You know, if you'd say a joke, he'll laugh at the appropriate joke. If you ask him a question, he can't really answer it. You could say, Nathan, if you want this or this, point your head to it and blink your eyes, and that's what he'll do.
Okay.
But he can't walk, he can't talk, he cannot do anything. But his mental facilities are there. If I'm introducing people, because we have people from community mental health that come to our house once a month, and they usually bring, other people from CMH for training or whatever purposes. And when they get there and it's a new person, I always introduce them because I want Nathan actively involved in the stuff. He'll go around to the room and look each one of them in the eye, and I'll say, this is so-and-so, this is so-and-so, this is so-and-so, this is so-and-so, and he'll go right around the room looking at them, and then I will say to all of them as a group, this is my son, Nathan. Now, as you can see, as I was introducing you, Nathan followed me around the room looking at you. His faculties are there. His body just does not work. He can't do anything. He's 100% dependent on us. So anyway, when we first got the lawsuit settled, it had to go to probate court. And probate court wanted control of the money, and they did that. They did that through appointing me as his guardian ad litem and his fiduciary. And we, at first, had all of this stuff processed in Presque Isle County. Well, the problem was the same judge that was involved with Nathan being where he was still in office. We wanted to move this away from him, and we got an opportunity to move it where Nathan's lawyers were, which is down in Jackson County. Now, I didn't know anybody down there. I didn't really know the lawyers that well. I just knew that we had hired them through a reference from the attorney who won the lawsuit for us, because they deal with trusts, and they're supposed to be one of the leaders in the state of Michigan. So we got them assigned to it and got it moved down there. Well, everything's going along just fine. And the partner of this law firm decided she wanted this case. So we thought, well, why are we changing attorneys now? We've got the one guy, and I know him pretty well, and I like him, but he says, yeah, but this isn't my bailiwick. I want to, give it over to the big expert in the office, and this is her. And I wouldn't have any problem mentioning her name, but I have a problem with what she did in the probate process. You know, that attorney-client privilege?
Yes.
That so-called attorney-client privilege? Well, I'll get into a little of that. Anyway, it was down there for about 15 years. And finally, Nathan was to the age, and my wife was to the age, that she too went on Social Security. And so there's a thing called, in the state of Michigan, DAC, Disabled Adult Child. Nathan was going to become a Michigan Disabled Adult Child, which meant the requirements that we were jumping through for this last 15 years, we wouldn't have to go through anymore. So the attorney decided she wanted to take over my job as fiduciary for Nathan. She wasn't making as much money off this case as she thought she should be making. Now, she wasn't involved in the lawsuit, had absolutely nothing to do with it. She was getting paid for her services as an attorney, no discounts, no breaks, no nothing. So I don't know if it was $200, $250 an hour, whatever. She was getting that money, and that's it. So she decided she wanted more money. She wanted this case assigned to her. And I said, no, absolutely not. And then she was going on and this and that. Well, if I don't get it, it's going back up to Presque Isle County, and then you'll have to deal with that and this and that and that and this. Finally, I said, fine, we'll give you a month. You do it for a month, and we'll see how that works out. Well, we got a bill for that month.
Absolutely.
About $8,000.
Absolutely. I knew where this was going.
And I said, no way. No way am I going to allow her to eat that money up, because she thinks she deserves it. She's made more than enough money as the attorney for that record. And I said, and besides that, you were representing me. I hired you, and you were representing me. Make sure I crossed my T's, dotted my I's, and did everything right. I'm not an attorney. She is. So anyway, we got in a disagreement, and I said, well, I'm going to fire you. Well, before I could get those words out of my mouth, she had written up a letter to the court to get herself removed as the court-appointed attorney or court-retained attorney for the trust, based on disagreements between the two of us. So I thought, well, that's okay. I can do it myself. We've been doing the stuff that goes to the court anyway, not her. We would just send it to her. She would take it and transfer it onto her letterhead, and then send it into the court down there in Jackson County. And so she said, well, I don't know what the court's going to do. They'll probably send it back up to Presque Isle County because you're not represented by an attorney down here anymore. Well, that's what I didn't want to do happen. because I knew what was going on up here in probate court, just like it's going on all over America.
Absolutely.
They're taking the profits and they're taking the money out of the assets of an individual who's handicapped, disabled, elderly, whatever. They're robbing those monies through local attorneys at $200 to $250 a billable hour.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's a billable hour? Anything they say.
Answering the phone.
I looked
Answering
at
an
the record
email.
today.
Absolutely. Anything. Answering the phone, answering an email, answering a question, writing a letter, whatever.
That's what this organization was doing to us as well. They would take Nathan's file during Christmas break, wherever they went for Christmas break, and they would review Nathan's file during Christmas break. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool of them, till I got a bill. And I'm thinking, who controls this? Who controls these billable hours? Not you and I, not family members, not important people involved in the lives of these individuals through probate court. No, it's between the judge and the attorneys. So I figured the scam out pretty quick. Anyway, next thing I know, the judge up here decides he's going to do a complete accounting from year one that it left there all the way up to the current date. 15 years worth of review. And when I say review, I mean complete review. Nickel, penny, dime. Every report. How many people keep all that paperwork past 7 years? The banking officials don't even keep it.
Right.
past
7 years is the statute.
So what? It's whatever the judge says. So what he did is he assigned the exact same attorney in 2019 that represented Jeremiah in 2013 to oversee my son Nathan's case.
And that was a conflict right there.
Well, interesting you said that, because the first court hearing we said that, I was shell-shocked, and I looked at my wife. She looked at me like, oh my God. Now, when he announced this, he had 2 deputy sheriffs in the courtroom blocking the door, as if me and my wife could not leave that courtroom. Intimidating. Completely intimidating. And he says to me, now, Mr. Dewey, as you know, I am a newly elected judge. I don't know you. You don't know me. You need to give me an opportunity to show you that I'm, going to do right by all this and all that. Well, he must not remember. But one thing I forgot to mention is my son's stepson, Joshua. He was present during the so-called sexual molestation in 2013 with his stepsister, Brittany. Joshua was 9 years old. They took Joshua and they gave him a label. He was a violent individual, a harm to himself and to others. They incarcerated this 9-year-old child in the Eagle Village detention facility for youths. They put him in the lockdown facility. They put him in a room that contained his bed, a nightstand, a light, and a steel cell door that they slammed at night and locked him in. If he had to go to the bathroom, he'd have to bang on the door like he was a prisoner in a state pen, and bang on the door to be able to go, oh, wait a minute. No, they have bathrooms. They have toilets in their cells, but in this cell, no toilet. He'd have to get their attention. Joshua was scared to death at 9 years old, didn't know why he was in there, had no clue about it. So Joshua, to make himself go to sleep, would bang his head back against the wall, the cement wall, to try and ease his emotional pain through physical pain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, I guess you could say that's a violent individual, but the thing of it is, during the day, he never did any of that. When he was out in the rec room with other people, he didn't do any of that. Only when he went to sleep at night. So anyway, the social worker who's been involved in this entire thing would not allow any family members except his mother to visit him. He was completely isolated from everybody else. One time, the facility said that my wife and some of my older granddaughters could go and see Joshua. So they went up there and they visited Joshua for a short period of time. He was in heaven, complete heaven. As soon as the social worker found out about this, she stopped it. She said, no family members are to be allowed to visit Joshua except his mother.
I wonder
Period.
why. That is very strange.
Because they wanted to keep him isolated. Now, here's a funny thing. I talked about the judge. Prejudiced or biased or whatever. Maybe he's a very, very fair man. Just before Joshua got incarcerated, he said he wrote a letter to Community Mental Health of Alpena, Michigan, asking them to intervene in Joshua's case and send him to a mental facility or a facility that they had that can take people who have emotional problems. Well, the funny thing is, and they denied his request. I read what they wrote up medically for Joshua. Joshua should not be placed in any facility like Eagle Village. The judge ignored what CMH recommended. He was actively involved in this case from day one. No if, and, or but. He was in Jeremiah's case and Nathan's case both. In Nathan's case, he was the prosecuting attorney. In Jeremiah's case, he was the judge. I brought up to the court-appointed attorney, Dan Martin, out of Sheboygan, that's a conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I don't see it as that. I said, okay, but you're not as personally involved in this case as I am and my son Jeremiah. It's a conflict of interest. He says, it's not. And until I see it, this is the way it's going to go. Well, here's what happened. Now Jeremiah's going to court to get his rights removed from all his kids, including his own young daughter, 4-year-old Chloe, that Storm and him had together. As soon as he said the words that we want to release Jeremiah's rights to his daughter willingly, the judge says, now wait a minute, we got to clarify this. We got to make sure it's all legal and we cover all our legal information in here, cross our T's, dot our I's, or whatever you want to call it. He starts asking questions. How do you want to do this? You want to do this through the adoption stuff, or do you want to do this for possible reunification? And Jeremiah's judge says, oh, I don't care, whatever the court wants. And he says, counselor, this is your proposal. How do you want to do it? He says, oh, through adoption. Now, they wouldn't let me in there. They had me stay out because he knew what he was going to do. If I were in there, I would go, whoa, what do you mean adoption? This is supposed to be a case of reunification.
Mm-hmm.
A little early for somebody to determine that this is adoption because, like, you're going to take the children completely permanently away from their mother as well. So, me being outside with the mother being outside, they got Jeremiah to say yes. Well, have you been advised of all your rights and potential complications involving this case. Jeremiah looks at his attorney, and he says, yes, Your Honor. He says, I need to hear from him. Yes. So then, this next question out of this attorney was, I would like to be released as the attorney for this case. That's all he was interested, was getting out of there. I got Jeremiah where you want him. He's pled no contest to releasing his parental rights for his children. That's what the judge wanted. So the judge says, wait, we have to clarify some more stuff. And they went through a bunch of stuff. And then the attorney says, again, Your Honor, I want to be released from this case. He says, we have one or two more questions, and then we'll go ahead and handle that. So they did that. Then again, he asked to be released. The judge granted it. He walks out. Jeremiah gets arrested. I get to come into the courtroom and see my son being handcuffed and taken off to jail. And of course, my wife and Jeremiah's girlfriend, Storm, were all crying. And a couple of other people that knew Jeremiah in there were crying. I'm going, what happened? Said, well, they arrested Jeremiah. I said, oh, okay. So let's go see what we can do. By then, now I'm looking for a paid attorney. So we leave, and 2 hours later, the judge calls my son back up into the courtroom. He's going to have a hearing with my son and charge him with 4 counts of criminal sexual conduct, first degree, based off of the closed Michigan State Police report from 2005. There's no prosecutor there requesting this. More importantly, there's no defense attorney there because he just released him from this case earlier during the day. So, of course, there's no one representing Jeremiah, and then there's no one from the prosecutor's office presenting this charges. It's the judge alone. That's a conflict of interest.
There are so many things,
yes,
that reek misconduct. It's ridiculous. And I'm sure there are so many more. You're listening to The Real Black Coffee, No Sugar, No Cream. We're talking to Mr. Donald Dewey about the wrongful conviction and the corruption that just wreaks havoc in the case of both of his sons. It's a family nightmare. We're going to take another musical break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what justice looks like for Mr. Dewey. We'll be right back.
I'm just trying to do the best that I can as a strong black man. Yeah. Here I stand as a strong black man, having done all I can to please my fellow man. I don't understand why that knife is in your hand. After doing all I can as a strong black man, I'm gonna take my stand as a black man. I will do the best that I can as a black man. I stand on my own as a black man. I'm gonna sing my song. Oh, this is me. So hear my plea. I'm a young black man, down on my knees. I say this world is wrong, and we don't have too long. I'm gonna take this stand as a strong black man. I feel the rain falling down on me. If you could see what's on my mind, oh, you will see. Everyone would be more kind. Everyone would be happy. I'm gonna keep on my goal. I won't let it go. As a black man, gonna take my stand. As a black man, I'ma do the best that I can. Oh, as a black man, I stand on my own. As a black man, I'm gonna sing my soul. Sometimes I gotta move. Gotta press my way through. Gotta press my way through. No, 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 no. Oh, no, 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 no. Oh, no, 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 no. Oh.
You just listened to As a Black Man by Millard Thomas Jr. You're listening to The Real Black Coffee, No Sugar, No Cream. And we're talking to Mr. Donald Dewey. Mr. Dewey, thank you. Thank you for sharing this story, because I know it's tough. And I know I became acquainted with you and your family story, I guess, maybe 2 years now? And I never... 3. So I never had an opportunity to hear it in its entirety as I have tonight. It would only be like a snippet here and there because, there was a parade of families and the platform had to be shared with other families. So I'm glad you had the opportunity to fully share your son's story. I have a question. What would justice look like for you other than your son being released because he's innocent? What does justice look like to you, Mr. Dewey?
A complete and proper investigation of this case, looking at all evidence, all witness statements, all affidavits written by his stepson, Joshua, who also was involved in this case, and even looking into Joshua's case as to why he was illegally incarcerated in Eagle Village. This can happen to anybody. I mean anybody. I don't care if you're black, white, yellow, green, purple. I don't care if you're educated. I don't care if you're uneducated. I don't care if you got low income, you got medium income, or possibly if you're rich. If you got enough money, you certainly can buy an attorney to do the right thing. But that should not be why they're doing it. We have all kinds of laws, all kinds of rights that are being violated every single day all across this country, not just Michigan. I have always believed in our judicial system. I have always trusted our police officers or law enforcement and our government. I worked for the government for 30 years of my life. I trust none of them. Absolutely none of them. I had a lot of faith in our Michigan governor. I had a lot of faith in our attorney general. Not now. There's too much involved in this case, even though it's extremely complicated, and it is. There's a lot of things I didn't say in here because we didn't have enough time. There's a lot more to this case than meets the eye. A good investigation by hopefully the federal government will expose everybody involved in covering this case up in the state of Michigan, because that's what's going on. I even wrote a habeas corpus to the United States federal government. It was the best document I have ever written in my life. Even another organization who reviewed it, who wanted a whole lot of money from me up front to take on Jeremiah's case, read that entire document and was completely teed off about how this went down. There is so much evidence contained in that document I wrote to the U.S. federal government that our attorney general had kicked out because she claims we have a whole bunch of other options available in the state of Michigan. Well, we really don't.
I'm going to say, like, what? What in the world does she mean, a whole lot of other options? There are not. You know, I would like to see some additional options. One would be ending qualified immunity.
That'd be a good one. Another one would be a 6500 motion. Again, I'm not an attorney. If they can take the motions that I write pro se, and I've met all the requirements of law in those pro se documents, they accept them, then they reject them. How are the real issues in this case going to be exposed? An attorney's not going to do it. We've already seen that by 2 court-appointed appeal attorneys. We have a big organization in the state of Michigan that looks at indigent cases. Why didn't they take on this case? Why did the trial court get a list of 5 or 6 names and they got to pick one off the list to work for and with them? I have emails that were written to these attorneys that clearly identify the red flags. Mm-hmm. I got emails back from these attorneys that said, no, we're not going to do that. Okay, so if you're not going to do what your client, Jeremiah, asks you to do, who are you working for? The last attorney said she got her marching orders from who?
The judge.
Was that from? Well, okay.
Hut 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, I didn't look at it from that perspective, but I think you're absolutely right.
Yes, absolutely. You know, the Judicial Tenure Committee is at fault as well.
I know.
The judges should follow their canons. They don't, especially when it comes to probate court. They start at number 1 and jump all the way down to number 4, 5, where the government is in charge now. You know, what about these other things? They are not following. So we could say the system is broke. I could agree, but I can also say that the system may not be broken. It is just not being it's being used the way it was designed, and that is for them and not for us. There is no justice for the people. You know, we elect these individuals, we put them in these seats, they're supposedly working for us. You know, you got to do, it's mighty strange. When I go into the courthouse, it's supposed to be my house because my tax dollars pay for it. My tax dollars pay for you. I elected you. When you are elected official, it's we the people. You work for me. But I don't get that feeling when I step inside of a courthouse. I don't get that feeling when I step inside of a police station. I don't get that feeling when I'm at a city council meeting. And don't you dare let them know you work for me. I don't work for you. I don't have to do what you say. You're supposed to do what I say. And see, we the people, we have to take our power back. We have to take our power back. And that's where the fallacy is. We have power and we need to take our power back because they work for us and they need to be held accountable. And I still say that the conviction integrity units are in the wrong place. Do we need people exonerated? Absolutely. But there should be a piece of this looking at the integrity of the police department, of the Attorney General's office, of the court, to make sure their integrity is intact. Because see, if their integrity is intact, we would have no need for a conviction integrity unit because people wouldn't be wrongfully convicted.
I agree. When my son Jeremiah first went to the prison up north, he was in there and he was being trained as an assistant baker by an elderly black man. That black man had been in prison for over 40 years. They would constantly come down to him and say, "You can be released today. All you got to do is say you're guilty, time served, and we'll release you right now." And he says, "I'm going to tell you this again, and I've told you it many times before. I'm not guilty of that crime. I was framed for that crime, and you all know it." He says, "I'm not going to admit to something I didn't do,
Absolutely.
even if it means my release. I will die here in this prison." That's wrong. People need to know about that kind of stuff. I would have never believed that before until we got involved in this case. More people need to open up their eyes, open up their ears, and see what's going on. And then when you see and you know what's going on, open up your mouth and say something. Don't sit back and wait for somebody else to do it, because by then you or one of your loved ones may be in the same situation that my son is in. And just so you know, my son does have a Facebook blog. It's called Jeremiah Dewey is Innocent. And if you want to get on that and say something, please do. Please remember, I'm not asking you to believe a single word I'm saying. I have it all in written documentation contained in the Michigan State Police Report from 2005, the state or the medical records from 2005, the transcripts from 2013, as well as the trials in 2014. I've got all this written documentation and evidence. Nobody has to believe a word I say. All you got to do is tell me. I'll give you or send you all the stuff in an email, and you can read it for yourself. I have no problem. Just remember, they're large, large documents. I don't even know how I can send them, except in multiple parts. There's something called the cloud. I don't know enough about computers.
You can have a Google Drive and drop them in a Google Drive and then just give someone access to it. But you know what? I feel sick to my stomach. This is sad. And it sickens me to know, especially your son that was found hanging in the cell.
Yes.
Mr. Dewey, your resilience and your perseverance is unprecedented. You've been through a lot of shit with these people.
Yes, I have.
And you're still standing. I salute you, sir. You are fighting hard for your kids. You are fighting very hard for justice for both of your sons. Unfortunately, the one, he's in the condition he's in, but at least he's with you now,
right,
instead of in that facility. And all we can do is hope and pray that Val Newman and her integrity unit can take a look at this situation a good, long, hard look, my namesake, who I have met and developed somewhat of a relationship with. Take a good, long, hard look at Jeremiah Dewey's case. Do you have hundreds of cases before you? Absolutely. Maybe you should prioritize by who got the most time. I don't know how your office works, and I don't know what they're doing about this situation. But what I will say is 22 to 40 years for allegedly fingering somebody, that's a long time.
Sure is.
That's a mighty long time. So, Mr. Dewey, as we prepare to close, is there anything you want to say to the listeners and the viewers?
Two things. One, if for some reason I should happen to die, remember, two of my friends died over this case. Jason Weber from Ionia and Don Ducastle from Onaway, representing both of my sons. If something mysteriously should happen to me, please demand a federal investigation, because you guys don't understand what these people are capable of to cover up for each other. The second thing is Val Newman. I've heard a lot about you. Yes, my son's case is currently sitting in the Attorney General's Integrity Unit, but they're not going to go against one of their own. Daniel Ping is an Assistant Attorney General who lied and committed perjury in the Court of Appeals, claiming in 2005 Jeremiah Dewey sexually molested Brittany G. hundreds of times and gave her the STD herpes. Where's your evidence of that? Look at the evidence from 2005 by Dr. Leger and Dr. Dev. Let me see you disprove that evidence. You want to say that the DNA is too old to look at right now? Well, it wasn't in 2005, and they determined it was not herpes. You cannot change that today without more evidence, unless you're the government. We, the people, deserve our constitutional rights, free from prejudice and bias. Don't use the scare tactic of a little girl who was manipulated by a prosecutor, a judge, and a bunch of other people into saying lies and committing perjury. Perjury can be proven in her case by looking at her testimony and also looking at the testimony of the Michigan State Police trooper, the CPS investigator, and the physician assistant. Somebody committed perjury in this case because their testimonies conflict with each other. So either the government officials did or the young girl did. Well, the teenage girl did. One of the two. So please get involved in stuff, not just Jeremiah's case, any of this stuff. How would you feel if your family member or your loved person, male, female, child, or whatever, was falsely or wrongly convicted of this kind of crime? We got to stop looking the other way. Mm-hmm. Our forefathers, if they had done that, we'd be under British rule right now. But they didn't. They put their lives on the line for us. We need to really look and help each other and clean up this judicial system, because it is messed up.
Thank you, Mr. Dewey. You have bared your heart and soul on many occasions, but tonight you had the opportunity to really, really dig beneath the surface of your story, and I thank you, and I appreciate you. And also, to my listeners, if I mysteriously die, go to the local emergency room and see who else got a couple of bullets in them. That's probably who killed me. Find them as well. Because this stuff is serious.
Yes, it is.
It's scary. And it's very, very serious. I also want my viewers and my listeners to take note of Mr. Dewey is a white man. This stuff sees no color at all. It's not just happening to us. It's happening to everybody. And we must band together the best way we possibly can. Join a rally.
Yes.
Wrongful Conviction Month, I believe, is October.
I believe so.
Yeah, join a rally. You know what? Don't wait until it's you. There's no longer 6 degrees of separation in anything. Don't wait until it's you or someone in your family to try to join a fight. We must come together and help one another. On that note, we're going to end our show. Mr. Dewey, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing the story of your entire family, because this was a domino effect. It went from one son to another son, then the grandson, and it's just going and going and going. Friends mysteriously getting killed. A person who's a law student for a very credible university starts to pick up the case. They're mysteriously killed. This is not a game. But you keep fighting, Mr. Dewey.
Thank you, I will. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart and my family's heart for doing something and allowing us the opportunity to share this, because a lot of people say they care, but they're not doing anything. And they don't share my son's webpage. They look at it, but they seldom put comments in there. It'd be nice to have comments in there. I actually had somebody attack me in there that we believe was in law enforcement from another state, and he was just browbeating me and browbeating me and browbeating me, and finally some people stepped up and started giving it back to him. He was saying he was going to come to Michigan and do all this stuff to me, blah, 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 and, I'm going on 70 years old, okay? Can I defend myself? Probably, but not against everybody. It just seemed like I was completely alone in this, and here I am getting verbally beaten down and threatened by this individual, and Facebook would block me at a moment's notice, if I post something about this case, even though for 9 years now I've been posting about this case, but if somebody didn't like a posting, they could report me, and of course, Facebook took my first account I had for over 9 years, and closed it out. And then I got to open up another one. But the thing of it is, there's so many things against us involved in this. Big government. Nobody really thinks when you talk about big government, they all think you're talking about the federal government. You got state government, you got county government, you got city government. They're all the government. They all work together.
And
like I said,
Mr. Dewey, there is a role that people can play with their local government because we vote for these people.
Yes.
Research. And those of you who don't vote at your local level, you should. Yeah. Because that's where the things happen that impact your life the most. It's in your local government. Do your research on these individuals and see who they are and who you're putting in office at these district courts. So when you go in front of them, you know what's going on. You know who you're dealing with. You at least know what they appear to be capable of. So with that, we're going to close this show out. You have been listening to The Real Black Coffee, No Sugar, No Cream, where I don't try to spill the tea or make you feel dazed like you drank a shot of cheap liquor. I just want you to see things from a different perspective. And tonight, that perspective is one of Mr. Dewey and mine. You have a wonderful week. You can catch the replay of this show on the Real Black Coffee, No Sugar, No Cream YouTube channel or wherever you stream your podcasts, Google Play, iTunes, etc. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.